Hello, this is Gavin Patterson from Studio 1790, and today we're going to continue on our tutorials on EQ. So the last time we did an EQ video, it was a more basic first kind of impressions of EQ. Like if you've never heard of EQ before, like what does it do? How does it work? And if you go onto the YouTube channel, you'll find that video. So this one is going to continue on from that, and it's going to be a little bit more advanced. And I'm going to use it in an actual Cubase session to show you how it sounds in a practical application. And we're going to use drums. Okay, so here we are in the Cubase session. This is a song called Go by a band called Interstate featuring Rachel Rien on vocals. It's a fantastic tune. It's not out yet. It should be out in the next few months on Spotify. So you can check out Interstate stuff on Spotify. They've already got a few singles out. So this is a recording that was done in France a couple of years ago. And they're finally getting around to release it just through lockdown and things like that. So I'm going to show you some processing I've done on the drum kit on this track. So I wasn't at the recording session in France, so I didn't know a lot about how it was set up, how it was recorded. So I've just got to use my ears. So I'll show you what I've got here. So up the top here, I've got kick, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hats, tom 1 and 2, overhead left and overhead right, and that's it. There is no room mics, so I assume the room that they recorded in was maybe small, or they chose not to mic the room up, which is fine. That's what we went with. So if I go down here, I can show you I've done something a little bit weird. I've created a fake room sound. So the way I've set this up is I have sent all of the individual, kick channels, so kick, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hats, toms and overheads, to another track called Rooms. And I've put a reverb on this track, put it full wet, and that's given me my room sound. So it's a fake room. And I've picked one that fits the sound of the kit. I'll let you hear this just now. So I'll do with and without, just to give you an idea. So, and I'll turn off all the other reverbs just now. Okay, here's the kit dry with no fake room. Okay, and I'll add in the room. So what that does is it just adds a little bit of width. It makes the stereo image a little bit wider, and gives me something extra, especially in the sort of chorus parts where you maybe want the ride cymbal a bit louder, the crashes to be a bit wider. So that's why I added that in. So we'll start with some EQ. What I'll do is I'll play the kit completely dry of EQ to compare what it sounds like with and without EQ. Okay, so here's the kit with no EQ. And with. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. Let's go into each individual channel and see what's going on. So we'll start with the kick drum. So we'll solo the kick drum and have a listen. So 0 processing. With processing. So you can hear immediately when you hear that dry, there's a lot of work needing done. So immediately I'm hearing extremely clicky sounding. Just, it doesn't sound very nice. It needs a little bit of a bass boost. So the first thing I'm hitting it with is this. It's the Eosis EQ. So it was a while ago since I did this, so I'm actually looking over what I did. So I've boosted a little bit of bass around between 50 and 100 hertz. And I'm also, I'm actually lifting more of that click. Let's hear what that sounds like. And bypass. Okay. So it's lifting the bass a little bit. So I must be doing quite a lot in the next stage. I am. Yeah. So I'm boosting 10 dB of 240, which is quite a wide Q on this one. So the Q, for those of you who don't know, I'll show you on this one, for example. So on the Eosis, I'll use this channel here, I think. Okay, so if you can see the little spike that's coming up, the Q, which is this one here, increases the width of the EQ. And what I mean by width is the wider the EQ, the more it will affect frequencies around about the one that you're selecting. So if you're selecting like 100 hertz, or in this case 120, if you increase the width of the Q, it means that it distributes the gain in a higher range of frequency. So if I put it really narrow, it only affects 120 hertz and a little bit either side of it. Increase the width, and the overall gain of 120 hertz comes down, but the gain gets spread across a whole range of frequencies, you know, all the way up to 500 here. So that's the Q. Now there are some EQ plugins or whatever. I'm just going to put that back to where I found it. Some EQ plugins, you can't change the Q. For example, on this one here, I can't change the Q as much. I can't change it as much as the other one. What this little button here does, this bell, what that does is it narrows the Q, but it's preset. I can't change that. But I can on these channels. So this is a 4-channel EQ, or a 4-band EQ rather. So the lower band and the upper band have this bell button, which basically narrows the Q. But I chose not to narrow it on this one. I maybe like the bass boost being quite wide down there. And then on this one, this is the Q button here. So, or the Q knob in this case, narrows and widens the Q here. So I've got quite a narrow Q on the sort of 600 range. I'm taking out quite a lot of 600. I tend to do that. So we'll hear before and after. So here's a before and after. Wow. Okay, so loads happening there. I'll turn the compression off just now just to hear it a little bit better. So before, after. Wow. Okay, so I'm adding 10 dB plus 15 dB of, wow, 7K and 5.5K roughly. 7.5K and 5.5K. Wow, I'm adding a lot of brightness to that. And a lot of 10 dB of 240 with a wide Q. And I'm taking away that boxy 600 range. So let's see if I'll add in the 600, see what it does. That's horrible. So yeah, I can see why I took that out. It sounds like cardboard. And then I'm putting a little bit of compression on it just to kind of keep it tamed. Yeah, barely anything. So that's the kick drum. That's interesting. So we'll move on to snare drum because that's always a fun one. So, oh wow, I've got lots going on. So I'll bypass everything, see what that sounds like. Let me just turn that reverb, that room reverb off. Wow. Okay, a lot going on there. Okay, let's see what's going on. So, first channel. Okay, I'm using a gate here. I've got a little bit of I don't have any EQ on this at all. So I'm using the gate function on this. I think I was having problems with bleed. So I was using the SSL plugin for gating out some rubbish I don't want. I think the drummer in this project, they do a lot of cross stick. So yeah. And I think I was having trouble. Yeah, so the gate's coming in here. So it's only letting through the snare hits. So that makes sense. So there's actually no EQ on this one. So the next channel, okay, I've got some stuff happening here. That's bizarre. Okay, so I have a... They're just listening to what's happening here. Okay, I seem to have been wanting to move or remove about 150 hertz out. So there might have been an annoying frequency at the time. And I'm adding and subtracting EQ at different ranges. So there's a nice broad high EQ that I'm adding, but I'm also taking off the top end of it. I guess I couldn't get the curve exactly how I wanted, and that sounded good, so I just left it. You see, there's no technical right way of doing this. It's kind of what sounds good. This looks ridiculous. There's probably a simpler way of doing this, but I've probably just reached for knobs and I'm just twiddling them till I make them sound good. This is horrendous. Like if this was examined in a university, I would fail with flying colours. But it's not really about passing or failing, it's whether it sounds good or not. And yeah, that's crazy. So I'm subtracting and adding at the same time, which is a bit strange. But hey, it works. So, and we'll go on to the next EQ. So yeah, I'm adding loads of top end to this. I always like to add top end to snares. I don't want to close that. Let me just bypass that. So this is it in bypass. And then engaged. Okay. I'm getting the crack of the snare drum, a lot of attack on the snare drum. I'm adding 7.5K, 15 dB right up the top. Taking a little bit of 638 away, and I've got a little high pass filter filtering out 63 hertz, so the low end stuff. Just giving it a nice crisp, and then I'm firing it through a nice Blueface 1176 waves. I think this is a CLA 76, so you can hear before and after with the compression on. Before, after. Well, I've got some more EQ at the end, and I'm after the compressor. I'm adding a little bit of low end, just to beef it up a little bit. I think I remember now. Actually, the drummer used a piccolo snare, which is a really shallow snare, and they are notorious for having no low end. It's all mid and high, and sometimes the trick to getting a good punchy snare drum is having that nice sort of 200 hertz range. You can see here in this graph, see the little hump at 200 hertz. That's where the punch is. So I'm just exaggerating that a little bit with this plugin. You can hear before and after. And after. So it's just adding that little bit of a bark to it. If you hear that with the whole kit, you can hear the difference. So that's everything engaged. And bypass. It's just night and day. So the thing to keep in mind with EQ, the job of the EQ is it's another tool you can use other than volume to try and shape the sound to fit together like a jigsaw. So where you can use volume to get a good balance of all the instruments, sometimes that isn't enough. You need an extra control with your volume. So that's what EQ is really. It's just volume, but volumes are different frequencies. So that's why an EQ plugin, for example, well, any EQ plugin, that's why it deals in decibels. Decibels meaning a measure of volume. So you're basically turning up or down the volume of a select frequency. And that's what EQ does. It's balancing where volume doesn't work to the fullest extent. You can use EQ to get an extra edge. It's just a little bit more refined of a process. And you can turn up a bass guitar to make it sound louder. You can turn it up to your heart's content, but it sometimes just won't sound louder. You can turn it up and up and up and up, and it's turning up the wrong thing. So what you do instead is you use EQ to figure out what needs turning up. You know it needs turning up, but you don't know where or why. Maybe there's something not right with the mix, and you're not quite sure what it is. EQ is just a tool that can just hone in on the problems. So that's what you've got to keep in mind with EQ. It's contextualized. Now I'm listening to this on bypass just now for two reasons. One, so that you can actually hear what I've done, and two, my computer is maxed out on CPU, and if I let you hear the whole thing, the thing will crash because I'm recording a video. So that doesn't help. But when you're mixing, you should always listen to the full mix when EQing, or as much as you can. If you're listening to like specific moments, then yeah, you can solo here or there, but generally you should be listening with everything all playing at the same time, because you need to hear it in context. It's like cooking and only tasting the ingredient, one at a time, and not tasting the whole mixing pot. You could be throwing all these lovely tasting ingredients on their own into a pot, and then together they don't work. It's kind of like that. So we'll go on to overheads while we're here. So okay, I'm not doing much at all here. I don't usually do much with overheads, because you see the close mics, that's the microphones that are closest to the sound source. So your snare drum, kick drum, toms. I always do lots and lots of EQ on the close mics, because the closer the mic is to the sound source, the less natural it is. Because if you listen to a soloed snare drum with no processing on it, like this, that's just the snare top mic. The snare doesn't sound like that in real life, and especially the kick drum. That's probably the most exaggerated example I can give you. Now, if you ever stand in a room with a drummer and he's hitting the kick drum, it sounds nothing like that. The closer the mic is, the less realistic it becomes, which is why you have to use so much EQ to get it to do something. But the overhead mics, or the room mics, are a pretty decent indication of what it sounds like if you were to stand in the room and listen to the drummer. So I'll play this just now with no EQ. See, it's not far away. It's maybe a little bit tinny or lacks depth and bass. That could have been the microphone choice. I don't know what microphones they used in this recording. But the further away you get from a sound source as well, the less bassy it becomes. It's the proximity effect. You get that with some types of microphones, not others. But you tend to find you get an imbalance in frequencies the closer you get to a sound source. Now you can use this to your advantage. You can make things sound bassier by getting the microphone closer, and you can take advantage of it. So for the EQ on the overheads, yeah, I'm not really doing much. I'm taking a little bit of top end off. So in this one, I'm adding half a dB of 9K, taking away half a dB of 1K, and then I'm rolling off some low end. Maybe there's a bit of a rumble or something. And then on the EQ and the, so I have two EQs here. This session I tend to be using two EQs, a graphic EQ and then the sort of an SSL kind of emulated thing. I like the sound of this one, that's why I always choose it. There are lots of other EQs in my arsenal, but I like the sound of this one. I just think it sounds really musical. So I'm basically doing nothing here. I'm taking a little bit of boxiness out, so that's 600. Taking a little bit out. But other than that, not much. So we'll hear a before and after. Before. And after. Okay, what I'm hearing there is it's tamed the high ends a little bit. It was a bit bright before, a bit tinny. You listen with it off. Especially listen to the crash cymbals. You can hear when that crash cymbal comes in, it's very bright. I'll just engage them. It's a lot more rounded sounding. So I don't really do much with that. And then I've got the fake room thing that I've set up. I'll turn the volume back up again. See what I'm doing in here. So I've got a reverb. That's fine. I don't think there's any EQ on that. No, there's a little bit. So the reverb itself has some EQ built in. So I've got a little bit of low end, a little bit of mid, and taking away some highs. Okay, so I'm doing some stuff here. Nothing much. A little bit of top end, a little bit of bottom end. This is just me sitting with the room, trying to imagine what this room would sound like if they had used room mics. It's a bit weird. I don't often do this because I usually record what I mix in my own studio, so I always use room mics. For some reason they chose not to, but I like the sound of room mics. I like the width it gives the kit. It gives it just another layer of dimension. Feels like you're, I don't know, standing on, in an auditorium, you're listening to the drum kit and you can hear every level of the drum kit as it reverberates around the room. I just like that sound. So this is what it sounds like. Hopefully if I can get it on its own. The way this is set up, it kind of plays with everything, which is annoying. We'll see what it sounds like. Yeah, it's going to play everything. That's irritating. Try to listen. There we go. Okay, that's with EQ. Without. Okay, it's barely any difference. So there must be something that I've noticed whilst listening to everything in context, is maybe just needing a little bit of top end. But as you can see, the majority of the EQ done on this drum set is on the close mics. That's kick, snare. Now snare bottom's another one. I usually add an absolute boatload of EQ to the top end, as you can see. That's where most of the top end of a snare drum will come from. It's just so rattly. Yeah, loads. I'm taking off 900 hertz for whatever reason. So it's super rattly. I'll turn that off just now. Wow. With the snare top. Yeah, it's just like the icing on top. It just gives that crack that you want, especially with the kick. And then full kit. Yeah, so if you combine that with there's a percussion track added in, you can hear how the frequencies all balance quite well together with the whole thing. So you can hear there's some percussion elements, shaker and tambourine. This is providing the hi-hat kind of sound, the high-end tinny sound that keeps the rhythm driving. So I didn't really need to go crazy on any cymbal EQ. I didn't need to bring out any highs because I knew this shaker was here. Well, the tambourine was there, the shaker was overdubbed later. So sometimes if there's a shaker track, I'll use that more so than a hi-hat. I might not go as crazy on hi-hats. But yeah, that's kind of a rundown on a typical session for recording, for mixing drums with regards to EQ. I might do another one of these on a simpler. So the problem with my computer at the moment is the CPU is maxing out and I can't play the whole thing at one time whilst recording a video because the whole thing just goes. So I'll find a simpler setup, a simpler song that isn't a bajillion tracks. I mean, we're sitting at almost 100 tracks, which ain't easy to process apparently. So, and I'll maybe show what I do with guitars. Guitars are quite a bit different from drums, so that'll be a good one to go through. But if anyone has any questions on EQ, please feel free to comment on this video and I'll make sure to address them. And if you have any future requests, I'll do that as well. Thanks for watching this video. If you would like to get more content like this, please subscribe and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. And make sure to click the notification bell if you want to receive updates on future videos. And if you have any requests for different topics or questions or any issues or problems you're having with your own mixing sessions, feel free to comment on the video or visit studio1790.com and you can fill in a little contact form and I'll get back to you.